why we did that and try to use that as an opportunity to explain to people what's going on in Gaza and Palestine. The court, the prosecutors, the Allen County prosecutors, dropped the charges. And so the trials that we were expecting on December 18th for me and today would have been Cliff's trial. Those didn't happen. So we wanted to do a news conference, and thank you very much for coming, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time. We wanted to do a news conference to explain exactly what we would have told the jury had we gone to trial, as we were hoping to get acquitted by the jury. So that's our purpose for being here today, and we have a couple of people to explain. First, I want to introduce Reverend Ann-Lisa Gross. This is her church, and thank you very much for allowing us to use it. And she'll have a few things to say and then introduce someone. Reverend.
Good morning. We're so glad to be here together, giving Cliff and Mike especially their day in this court, a day full of this group of witnesses. I'm going to speak very briefly and then ask my friend Sarah to speak too. I was in Palestine in 2008, and it was shocking, demoralizing, and horrifying that my U.S. passport meant I could travel a country where the native people were not allowed to travel. They could not travel freely on roads or through checkpoints. And our U.S. passports, for those of us here who have U.S. citizenship, are a call to stand up, to put ourselves in the line, to use our privilege for good, and that's what Cliff and Mike have done, and we are grateful to you for doing that. And then I just wanted to share 2 verses of this hymn that we have in our hymn book, because it was I never thought it would be possible that this many months into this war, that the war would still go on. If the war goes on and the children die of hunger, and the old men weep, for the young men are no more, and the women learn how to dance without a partner, who will keep the score? If the war goes on and the rich increase their fortunes, and the arms sails soar as new weapons are displayed, when a fertile field turns to no man's land tomorrow, who will approve such trade? Those of us who call Allen County or the neighboring counties home know that we need to keep speaking up to Raytheon and the other weapons manufacturers who are here in our community making all kinds of money by war crimes. So I also wanted to ask my friend Sarah, who's also a pastor in Fort Wayne and has been a witness to these injustices, to just say a few words. So Sarah Offner-Seals is pastor at Plymouth Congregational Church in downtown Fort Wayne.
Thank you, Annalisa. I will be brief. I traveled to the West Bank in June of 2023, just a few months before this genocide began, and the people that I met there, the land, the place, the culture, I fell in love with. And so it is deeply saddening to me to continue to watch 15 months now of genocide. And my only request to these weapons manufacturers, to our United States government, to everyone, we need an arms embargo on Israel now, because Palestinian lives matter. We need an arms embargo on Israel now to force a ceasefire, because the lives of more than 46,000 Palestinians who have been killed, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, grandfathers, grandmothers, children, more than 17,000 children, their lives matter. We need an arms embargo and a ceasefire now, because the 8 infants who have died, frozen to death in the last 2 weeks alone, their lives matter. Free Palestine.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Next, I want to introduce Cliff Kindy. We met in Iraq, as I mentioned, in 2003. Cliff was there with a group called the Christian Peacemaker Teams, and I was there with a peace group out of Chicago called the Voices in the Wilderness, which is now called Voices for Creative Nonviolence. That's where we met, and we've became friends and stayed in touch. Cliff has a whole chapter in the book that I wrote about that experience, as a matter of fact. And so I got a hold of Cliff and said, would you like to do something in Fort Wayne? And he said yes. So I'd like to let him explain his part of this.
Thank you, Mike. And welcome to all of you here. Thank you for being willing to come and be a presence here, and for media as well for covering this. In some ways, I see our presence here as an invitation to goodness. I think of it as a way to say, you know, if we're going to survive as human beings, we need to be good to each other. And that has a certain standard. Being good to Mike means being good to him in the same way that would be good to me. So if it's good for Mike, then it might be good for me too. And in all our interactions with people. So whether it's political groups, religious groups, or economic groups, or security groups, or farmers, or whatever, how can we be good to each other? It was many years ago, I was in Gaza with CPT, with Christian peacemaker teams at that point, now community peacemaker teams. But we were living in the homes of families in the refugee camps. So I was there for 3 months that summer. It was a transforming experience for me. Gaza is it's a pretty place, pretty people, but what was happening there and what continues to even happen in a worse way presently has an impact on whoever's there, whoever sees it. So, as Sarah said so well, it's time to stop the killing in Gaza. And we've tried lots of different ways. You know, we've spent our lives trying to live in such a way that wars do not happen. When Arlene and I got married 53, 54 years ago, we said, we don't want to pay taxes to carry out war. So how are we going to do that? And we decided to keep our income below the taxable level so we wouldn't owe taxes for war, and maybe in a tiny, tiny way, we wouldn't be living a lifestyle that would require war to defend it. I'm still not sure what that looks like, but it's been a 54-year experiment. And I chose not to go to war. I signed up first to the draft as a conscientious objector. And then after doing a year of volunteer service, I returned my draft card because I said, you know, the whole system, primary objective is to get bodies to go to Vietnam. And I don't want to support that. So I left selective service as a way to disengage from war, to disengage and try to engage in goodness instead of things that don't promote goodness. And then for years with Christian peacemaker teams, with CPT, I worked in the war zones of the world, like Palestine and Gaza and Iraq and Congo, DRC Congo and Nigeria and Colombia and Mexico and Vieques, First Nation struggles in US and Canada. How do you stop a war? When we were in Iraq, we were asking the question, what would it take to stop a war for a change? Well, I think we have the tools to do it if we're willing to use our creativity and willing to take the risks. So that's what we were trying. We didn't, as if any of you were paying attention. We didn't stop the war in Iraq, but I think we could. And I think we could do the same in Gaza. So this is a part of that process. Raytheon, RTX, on the New York Stock Exchange, makes all kinds of things, tools and technologies, weapons and technologies. They make the, what is it, 2,000-pound bunker buster bomb. I think you have some pictures of that, don't you? I mean, of what its consequences are. Or They are responsible to do the upkeep on the fighter jets in the Middle East. They provide the technologies that put a targeting mechanism on that big bunker buster bomb. So how do we invite them to goodness? What does it take to be invited to goodness? Because in many ways, it's all of us together. Raytheon has to be a part of the project. And so we have to engage with Raytheon. Well, when this whole thing started, we took letters to the military contractors in Fort Wayne and the Air National Guard base, and we had 3 asks. 1, stop selling weapons that get used against the people of Gaza. 2, use your influence, because your influence is better than my influence, to implement a total arms embargo of Israel, what you were saying, Sarah. And 3, figure out how to convert your assembly lines from things that kill people of the world to tools that help the people of the world. I'm an organic market gardener. I know what kinds of things, what kind of tools you need to grow food that help people, that feed teachers, that feed construction workers, that feed health workers. You know, how do we do things that promote goodness? And then we had a letter to Parkview Regional Health Facility. You know, it's a big health program, but they leased the land to Raytheon. They're also connected to L3 Harris, one of the military contractors here in Fort Wayne. What does that have to do with health? I mean, have they looked at the pictures of what happens when those weapons end up in Gaza? Is that health? No, it's not health. So we asked them to, 1, terminate that lease with Raytheon. 2, use their influence. They're a big health system in the central United States. They probably have more influence with our administration than I do. So use that influence to implement a total arms embargo. 3, send some of their health teams to Gaza to work in the Doctors Without Borders facilities that are working in Gaza to try to put people back together after all the weapons land there. What work do you need to do? We need to do? We need to implement an economic system that doesn't depend on making more money or gaining more power, but an economic system that helps people, that does goodness to people. It may mean that we can't make as much money. There's good money, as Mike was pointing out, in weapons. But how do we change that? So if you change our economic system, we'll work on some of these other things. There are warrants out for Netanyahu, for Gallant, for Deere, from the International Criminal Courts. How do we hold people responsible? How do we call people to goodness?
Thank you, Cliff. I think you'll probably notice a difference in Cliff's approach from mine, being part of the Christian Peacemaker teams when I met him, and I'm a veteran for peace, and we come at this from a little different directions. I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy, and I took care of guys that came back from Vietnam in pieces, and I was 18, 19 years old, and I saw what war does to people, and I lost friends, and I learned about the 2 million plus people in Vietnam that my taxes helped to kill, and all the other things that happened. And after 2.5 years, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I got out of the Navy as a conscientious objector and have been active in these kinds of struggles ever since. So Veterans for Peace sent a letter to the U.S. State Department back in February to tell them, not that they needed telling, but to tell the U.S. State Department that there are laws on the books federal statutes on the books already that are being violated any time Congress votes for weapons. Weapons are sold or transferred to Israel because Israel is breaking all sorts of international human rights law. And those laws are the Export Control Act, the False Statement Statute, the Genocide Prevention Act, and the War Crimes Act and the Prohibition on Assistance statutes. All those are currently on the books and are being violated. So what Veterans for Peace did back in September was to say in 25 cities, we are going to do whatever we can to nonviolently enforce these laws. And that meant trying to block the production of these weapons, trying to stop business as usual in Congress, whatever it took. And so that's why we did what we did here in Fort Wayne. And this, as I mentioned, is the information we would have presented at trial. I'm going to go down real briefly and read the statistics, and then we have people who can show you what that means. What I did was took the area, square miles in Gaza and their population and compared it to the area and the population of Allen County. And here's the comparisons. You can, this information is available on the Veterans for Peace website and links to the sources. Tons of bombs dropped. As of October, now this is already 3 months old information. As of October of 2024, Israel's military dropped over 85,000 tons of bombs on Gaza. That's 591 tons per square mile, exceeding what was dropped on Dresden, Hamburg, and London in World War II. Now for Allen County, that comparable number is 390,000 tons of bombs at 591 tons per square mile. In Allen County, imagine, 390,000 tons of bombs coming down. Casualties. For Allen County, if it was affected the same way Gaza is, 7,740 bodies would have been recovered from the rubble. Over 17,000 would be wounded. Up to 36,000 people, dead people, would be buried in the rubble, and over half of those are women and children. For healthcare infrastructure, Allen County, 20 hospitals and health centers would be destroyed. 30 doctors, 47 nurses, 14 pharmacists, 54 support staff would be killed, 24 ambulances damaged in your county. Disease. For Allen County, the comparable numbers are 296,000 people. 75% of the population would be infected with diseases from lack of sanitation and running open sewage. 379,000 people, 96% of the population, would endure severe lack of food and have not had access to clean water for months. 79,000 would face outright starvation. 1,800 cancer patients in Allen County would not receive necessary treatment. Buildings damaged and destroyed. There'd be 100,800 houses and 7,668 businesses in Allen County damaged or destroyed, and 148 churches in Allen County destroyed or damaged. The number of unexploded ordnances that Allen County would have to deal with after the war would be almost 300,000 pieces of unexploded ordnance. Now, these are the numbers. This is what our tax dollars are buying, and this is why we sat in that driveway. What I'd like to do is to ask these good citizens to each, if you could just come over to the middle and take a couple of seconds to show your photo poster. Just step right over here. These are all from International Wire Services, every one of these, and they show the effects. This is what our tax dollars are buying. Thank you. Thank you very much. Veterans for Peace is asking our members around the country to take this information and run the numbers in their city or their county so we can try to get across to people the impact of what our tax dollars are buying. And I want to leave with just this one fact. Every citizen of Israel gets universal health care guaranteed to them from their government, as do people in a number of countries in Europe and other places. Obviously, we don't have that here. We have tens of millions of people with no health care or very inadequate health care. But our taxes subsidize not only this kind of weaponry, but they subsidize a lifestyle in Israel that our own citizens don't have. And I think it's time that we let our government know that we're really tired of being taken advantage of in this way. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll be glad to take any questions if you have of any of us. Yes, yeah. Oh, okay. They want to do a short interview. So, and any other questions or brief comments? Yes. You had any response?
They have not dealt with the invitation, the asks, right. They did enable us to carry that letter to Raytheon offices, but that was all. They didn't respond to their questions. So I think you would be proper to continue asking those questions of them.
And we delivered that letter to 16 offices in the United States of the U.S. State Department. Our members did, and got 0 responses back. So, and they want to know why people begin to occupy congressional offices and do things of that sort. So the gentleman wanted to do a brief interview. Any other questions or comments? And I'll be happy to stick around for a little bit too before I have to go back to Toledo for some doctor's appointments. But thank you very much, Cliff, if you want to finish up.
Again, thanks to each of you for being here, because I think it's an indication of an overwhelming concern around the world for what's happening in Gaza. I think in terms of numbers of people, if you look, I mean, the U.S. administration, both the present one and the one to come, are going to support the horrors that are happening in Gaza. It's going to take you to stop it, and you do have the tools to stop it. All around the world, people are crying out against what's happening in Gaza. The United Nations General Assembly, which has no authority to stop it, but they voice their concern almost unanimously that the occupation of Palestine should stop, that the war in Gaza should end, that people should continue to try to stop the weapons of war that are going to Gaza. All around the world, communities are crying out on behalf of the people of Gaza. So it's not power that carries the impact of these kinds of weapons is used because it doesn't have the authority of the people. It isn't representing the people, so it tries to force its opinion, its decisions by these kinds of weapons. And they can destroy. I've seen what they did in Iraq. I've seen what they could do everywhere around the world, those weapons. But I remain convinced that the tools that we have are more powerful than all those weapons. So I encourage you to be about the good work. Thank you.